Good morning. We talk a lot about emerging issues at our place, and for kind of obvious reasons, but there's really nothing emerging about hunger in America. Each year, somewhere between 10 and 20% of Americans are food insecure, meaning they don't have access to enough food or food of a decent enough quality to meet their needs. There's also nothing emerging about students taking big issues facing our society seriously. Over the years, we've seen young people play a critical role in working to improve civil rights, to end wars, to reform workplaces, to control tuition, to increase racial equality, to slow down climate change. The list goes on. Some young people, when they're concerned about something, start to write about it or blog about it or tweet about it or post on Instagram about it. Others march or protest. A few run for elected office. Many of you who watched our last show saw Chris Suggs, who's a 21-year-old, just graduated from college, who last week was elected the youngest elected official in North Carolina history, elected to City Council of Kinston. There are all sorts of approaches that young people can take to making a difference when it comes to public policy. But regardless of how they do it, the Institute for Emerging Issues is interested in making sure that there are plenty of people who care about it going forward. That's why we've been so excited for the past few months to work with a group of students from across the state on a project called Pilot 21. Pilot 21 was involved a coalition of campuses from across the state coming together. Shaw, Wake, Duke, NC State, UNCW, UNC-Asheville, North Carolina A&T, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. All those campuses came together to talk about a big issue that they had identified that they wanted to work on. The project was sponsored by the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation based on an idea from their trustee, Jane Smith Patterson. We worked with Carolina Demography to make sure that students had access to the latest and greatest data that would enable them to form ideas, but it was really a student-driven project. It was faculty advised, I think is how we described it, meaning that there were faculty on each campus that were available to students. And the role of the Institute for Emerging Issues was to help them move the process along, answer questions, and ensure that they eventually came together last week in Raleigh to hash out a series of ideas that they developed all around the topic they said they wanted to work on. What can we do to reduce hunger, or what some people call food insecurity in North Carolina? So last week, the teams got together, they shared their ideas, they listened to experts from across the state, and they came up with some ideas that they really wanted to move forward. On today's show, we're going to talk with some of them about their ideas. We'll hear from the former president of the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, the just outgoing president, Ronnie Smith, who's written his own report along with a few other county commissioners about what to do about food insecurity in the state. And we'll talk about what young people who have ideas that they want to move forward can do to ensure that they are successful. So today, food, hunger, and how young people can get engaged in public policy. We welcome all of those of you who are joining us, whether you're on LinkedIn Live or Facebook Live or YouTube, or if you're watching a recording on our website, emergingissues.org, or on our YouTube channel. Regardless of how you got here, we want to hear your ideas about what you think we can do about hunger in North Carolina, or ideas about how young people who have ideas that they want to move forward might be more successful in doing that. So we want to start with a little bit of background about how the project worked. We mentioned it was student-led on individual campuses. We also had super invaluable student leadership here at the Institute for Emerging Issues. Shevani Mehta is our first Hunt intern at the Institute for Emerging Issues. She's a Parks Scholar at NC State, where she's currently a senior and thinking about law school. She is also a future, and I would say current, rock star. So, Shevani, welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today, Leslie.
So we've talked about students working together to develop ideas on reducing hunger. Can you talk about how that worked logistically this fall as folks from both within campuses, but also across campuses, tried to get to know each other, tried to share ideas, and then tried to put them into some kind of consumable form? How did that whole process work, and what worked and what did we struggle with?
Yeah, of course. So the whole idea behind Pilot 21 was to get students to pick a public policy issue and come together and figure out, okay, once we have this issue, how do we use a data-driven approach to figure out some recommendations that we can tangibly move forward? So the topic was selected last March when the Pilot 21 participants did a deep data dive with our partner that you mentioned, Carolina Demography. So after hearing a presentation from the director, Becky Tippett, and another data analyst, the participants ultimately voted to select food insecurity as their issue of focus. Some of the other topics that were in the air were educational attainment and broadband, as well as affordable housing and mental health. So from after picking food security to move forward, 5 focus areas were developed, including improving food security for K-12 populations at the community level, the university level, through public-private partnerships, and through the lens of underserved farmers.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about this balance that we were trying to find? So obviously we want to help students move ideas along, but we also want to stay out of their way. And that was the same for the faculty members on campus. Each campus had a faculty representative who was there and available, but we were trying to let the ideas sort of develop organically. What was the tension there between wanting to kind of shape the ideas ourselves and let the ideas develop in a way that students could truly own?
Exactly. So I think the role of IEI was to kind of be a sounding board and to throw some ideas out there and then let the students run with it. And I think this really stemmed from Jane Smith-Patterson's view and her own experience when she was a student at UNC-Chapel Hill. She had experience organizing, and at that time, there was no one to look up to for help, right? The students had to do it themselves. And I think that's kind of been the spirit and the drive behind Pilot 21 is at some point, students are going to have to go out into the real world. And at the end of the day, they're going to have to use each other and reflect on each other's opinions and different perspectives to advance an idea forward. There's not always going to be someone to go to for advice. And while mentorship is so important, and we tried to have that within the Pilot 21 program, at the end of the day, it's the students coming together and using each other as a sounding board, using each other's perspectives to really move an idea forward. And so I think, there was obviously some bumps along the way, as this was a pilot program called Pilot 21. But at the end of the day, I think the students were really able to come together and use each other's perspectives to make some great recommendations. And some of the obvious challenges along the way were that for the first half of this project, they were working in a completely virtual environment, right? We were in the middle of the pandemic, and seeing the students come together at the actual summit last Friday was a really beautiful thing. Seeing them meet in person for the first time and being able to have in-person conversations was a really nice thing to see.
I agree. It was pretty amazing to see students who'd never met before stand up and give these seamless presentations that, looked like they've been working on them for months. So it was really inspiring to me. Another thing I just thought of when we're talking about providing help to people is sometimes that help can be toxic because, if you're too experienced or you've been around too long, you might tend to react to an idea saying, well, we tried that back in '85 and that didn't work. And, it's a horrible idea. You shouldn't try that. And it may be that the circumstances have completely changed. And so sometimes, when you're trying to provide help or advice to someone, you're actually kind of working against them or making the process even harder for them. And so it was nice to see, some ideas that, I maybe had heard before, but somebody was coming at them. And if they'd asked my opinion about them, I might have said, I don't really think that would work. But instead, hearing their energy and seeing their perspective and the particular way they're approaching it, I kind of got it. Well, maybe that could work. I didn't think it worked last time, but maybe it could work this time. And it was really kind of inspiring to me to hear.
Yeah, and just to touch a little bit more about how this project was really student driven. After the 5 focus areas were set, the students were working on cross-campus teams, which I think is such a crazy thing to think about when we're stuck in the middle of the pandemic, now that we have access to all these virtual technology, students can still connect with students on other campuses, which is something when Jane was a student would have never happened. And so it really just goes to show how student involvement in public policy has evolved since that time. And after, so there were student leads such as Ron, who you'll hear from later today, and he was one of the people leading these cross-campus teams and creating recommendations. So although there was not a huge involvement from the faculty and they were still there to advise them, student leads like Ron were the ones taking the charge to push these recommendations forward.
Yeah, let's bring in Ron Dumas right now. Ron Dumas is at UNC-Asheville. And Ron, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me this morning.
I want to talk in just a minute about some of the specific ideas you've been working on, but I also wanted you to talk about what Shevani was just referencing, this challenge that we have of both wanting to develop our ideas by ourselves and have them totally be our ideas, and the knowledge that when they wander out into the world, they're going to collide with people who are going to pick at them and maybe criticize them. But we also know that those ideas are going to be better. And so you were working on a couple of different ideas, and we'll get to those in just a second. But can you talk about the process of what it's like when an idea wanders out into the world and other people try to improve it, maybe in ways that you hadn't imagined?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the true spirit of UNCA, we prioritize building a coalition first. At the very beginning of our project, once we had decided on a topic, we reached out to stakeholders to identify the challenges that they faced and what sort of improvements we can make as an organization, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel from the start. And in that way, we were able to prioritize innovative ideas rather than just going through the sort of structural path and improving the infrastructure that existed, instead of building new things and having to go through that whole difficult process. So we had other people involved from the very beginning of the strategy.
One of the statistics that you quoted, and there are a lot of different versions of this statistic depending on who gathers the information, but it was the percentage of people on 2-year and 4-year campuses who are food insecure. And you found a survey from Real College Survey that found that 48% of students on 2-year campuses and 41% of students on 4-year campuses have been food insecure. Just a huge, and I think probably for some people, shocking number. And you decided that was where you were going to target your thinking in your areas, was what can we do on college campuses to reduce things. Can you talk a little bit about your idea?
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, it's an incredible number, really. And what I found is that a lot of students don't really understand that they are experiencing food insecurity. It's sort of a running joke, actually, the student who eats ramen every night. But you realize that those things aren't brain food. They're not sustenance for the work that we come to college to do. They make learning harder. Something that the representative who spoke at the beginning of the summit said, hungry kids don't learn. And I can only imagine how many students go back to their dorm rooms at the end of the day and have a heat up White Castle burger, which was my go-to meal as a freshman, or have ramen for dinner. And they go to bed with a full stomach, but without the nutritional value that they need to be an active participant on campus. And as a student leader, I've been a student leader for about 3 years now, running various organizations. I know that a student's willingness to get involved is critical to their success in academia, because the more they get involved, the more they really love what they do. And the more they love what they do, the better experience they have in college, or after college, they continue to work. So to give the students the basic building blocks of being successful and the energy really to get involved in the things that they love to do, I think is critical to a successful academic campaign.
Thank you. And you really made a compelling case at the summit. I want to show people just a few pictures of what the summit looked like, and then we'll start to talk about maybe what happens next with these ideas. But it was a gathering at NC State. It was in person. It's the first in-person gathering that we at IAI have done since the pandemic started. And you can see some of the photos. We're in the Hunt Library downstairs. Students got up, top left, you can see them giving presentations. Other students listened after the students gave presentations. Then they asked questions just to clarify. They talked about some of those ideas. We heard from elected officials and people who spend time trying to convince people to do things in an afternoon panel. And then students got together and ultimately came to a vote about how to move their ideas forward, what the next steps would be. And so, Shevani, I wonder if you might be able to just talk about the idea that kind of came out when students voted. And let me just say, as students voted, it doesn't mean that the ideas that didn't rise to the top aren't going to be pursued. It just means that there was one idea that emerged that really kind of became, okay, here's what we're all going to work on together. So can you talk about that process and then what emerged from that? And then we'll talk a little bit about strategies to move that idea forward.
Of course, yeah. So just to echo, the whole, goal behind Pilot 21 was to really encourage this cross-campus collaboration. And so just because one recommendation was advanced doesn't mean the other ones aren't going to be pursued individually. Or, for example, Ron and his partner Fisayo are choosing to pursue a recommendation just on their specific campus. So this is just the recommendation that all Pilot 21 participants are collectively moving forward. And the advanced recommendation came from the campus food security team. And so their idea was to add a small increase to the student affairs tuition that will go directly towards combating campus food insecurity. And part of this recommendation was also creating a campus food access coalition. And I just have to say the team presenting this recommendation did a great job showcasing some of the goals of this program. So how their recommendation would be feasible and tangible and how it can truly make an impact across campuses. They did a great job showing a data-driven approach, just like all the other teams. And then following this, as far as next steps, the students are going to be meeting again in December virtually to give an update of their progress. So student teams under the UNC systems are working with the Association of Student Governments, and I'm sure, Ron, you can touch on this a little bit more, to implement the small student affairs increase, and they're going to be getting a lot of support from the HBCU campus teams. And Duke and Wake Forest actually have a unique perspective on this because their campuses have already have a universal student food access built into their university meal plan. So perhaps Pilot 21 participants from these universities can give some tips onto what to do right, what to do wrong as far as implementing these plans across the universities.
It's interesting. There's just in this one proposal, there are a lot of the common issues that face any public policy proposal trying to go anywhere. And I'm thinking specifically about, you'd think that 8 campuses from across North Carolina, you come up with an idea, then you just take it from size 1 and then apply it on all 8 campuses. But the truth is there are campuses that are part of the UNC system. There are private campuses that aren't. There are HBCUs that are different. Some of the private campuses are different than others. You mentioned Duke and Wake Forest already have a partial solution in place. And so, there's a whole new development in the public policy world called scale science that is looking at how you take an idea that might work one place and bring it to scale. And basically, I think what people are learning is that it can't be Xeroxed. It can't be simply copied. It has to be essentially mass customization is the approach. And I think, just as this idea begins to emerge, it sounds, relatively simple to increase student fees a little bit and have a multi-campus coalition come together on it. But even that is a little bit tricky. Ron, what did you learn as you talked with your folks from other campuses that you shared with each other, and what did you learn, that just made you think, oh my gosh, I can't believe that they are doing things so differently than we are? What stood out to you or impressed you or surprised you?
Well, I want to echo something that you said earlier, that these projects are campus specific. We at UNC-Asheville met with stakeholders first, and being a smaller university, a student like myself who gets involved a lot was able to meet with senior staff and with staff-run departments and sort of develop the specific plan that works at UNCA. But a lot of students that have larger campuses, for example, Duke and Wake Forest or NC State, they don't have the access to the senior faculty that are willing to offer support. So to hear the sort of grassroots activism that has to take place on those universities is really inspiring, particularly at A&T. Their team came together to develop very comprehensive plans, step-by-step strategies, and provide a lot of resources to other universities. So I think we have to rely on each other really is something that I learned a lot in working in this process. The teams that I've had, both the cross-campus group and the UNC-Asheville specific group serving on too, I've learned to really rely on my team and divide the work with my team and allow idealism to really take root at the very base of what we do and develop from that sense of idea, that sense of innovation, and that sense of group leadership rather than a specific leadership. One of the pictures that you showed early on in the top right, I believe, showed all the members of the Pilot 21 group at a round table. And I remember pulling that together, getting all of us together. It's like, let's go to this room. Let's really work it out. Let's hash it out. And you could feel the energy in the room and the innovative ideas coming from all parts of the table. And hashing out that plan that Shevani was mentioning earlier of doing campus-specific projects, but also dividing into categories so that we could best have a unified front and get this done in an efficient manner that doesn't dominate dominate the rest of the time that we have left as students. Because for some of the seniors, like myself, we have maybe 6 months before we graduate. So I wouldn't want to put together a plan that required to take up all of that time and all that energy because it's going to get tight going into the future. So we relied on our younger people to develop this strategy that could be done efficiently and quickly and get done what we really need to get done.
There were two moments I really liked from the process, and you alluded to one of them. The first was the first night we had a gathering at a restaurant on the NC State campus, and we were trying to figure out how to get students from other campuses to start talking to each other. And while we were trying to figure that out, we looked outside and everybody had gathered around a fire pit and they were talking to each other. So we didn't have to do anything about that. And then during the summit, we were sitting around trying to figure out, okay, now how do we get students to work together to figure out what the next steps are? And so we're kind of pulling our hair out, trying to figure out the best process. And then somebody comes by and says, well, they're right next door. They already figured it out. They're talking to each other and they're moving everything forward. So it sort of validated, I think, our suspicion from the beginning, which is that folks care about this issue. This is a really important issue in North Carolina, and you guys are going to figure out a way to move this forward. And it was really inspiring to me to see.
If I could shout out two other leaders from the pilot summit that was critical to that roundtable that you saw, Hannah Braun, who took the executive role like she was born into it. She was able to keep us on task, keep us on time. We only had about 20 minutes in between the break to really hash out this plan. I myself, I'm sort of an idealist and a strategist, so I was taking everyone's ideas and packing them into like how efficient can we get it done, how quickly, how much work is it going to take. And William Teasley from A&T, who has already instituted the Swipe Out Hunger program at A&T, which is the policy-specific part of my plan. Having his expertise and his leadership and his patience as a voice to guide the conversation at the table, those things are critical. So the inputs from the fellow students and the student leadership that just rose to the top naturally, and everyone could kind of find their pace, their sort of cadence, and work in ways that amplified the strengths of everyone at the table. Those sort of mechanisms were really critical to this idea coming together as quickly as it did and putting together a plan as sound as it is to get this issue dealt with without, these sort of larger than life ideas that would dominate the next bit of time that we have as students.
Yeah, totally agree. What did you observe during the process, Shevani, that you'd like to lift up?
Yeah, I was just going to add that at the beginning of the day, we started our day with some remarks from Congresswoman Johanna Hayes, and she was just touching on the power that young people have to influence public policy. And then seeing that roundtable where students who had never met each other in person were strategically playing to each other's strengths and weaknesses without really knowing what their strengths and weaknesses are. It was a really inspiring thing. Like you said, we were sitting in the back trying to figure out, okay, now how do we get them to kind of work together? They don't really know each other. And then they were already making it happen. It was a really inspiring thing to see. And Representative Hayes was touching on, the excitement and passion that young people have behind getting these issues solved. And then that was just happening right in the moment. So it was really like a full circle moment happening throughout that day.
One of the things she mentioned was that when she got elected, people were shocked because she came from a relatively urban district, and she said she wanted to be on the ag committee. And they said, there is no ag in your district. And she said, yeah, but there's a lot of hunger. And so a personal passion of hers, one of the things she said is hungry people can't learn. And so she has risen to be the head of the nutrition committee and the committee on agriculture. And it just, she's a former national teacher of the year. So, pretty remarkable woman overall. But I thought it was really interesting that she was able to identify an issue and come at it from a very different standpoint. Most people from urban districts wouldn't think to be on the ag committee, but she realizes how important it is to the people who are her constituents and has figured out a way to move that idea forward. The other thing she said that I'd like you guys to comment on is that she was probably the least political of the teachers of the year that she saw when she came in. She joined all these other teachers of the year, and they all had these political agendas, and things they wanted to work on. And she didn't know anything about that. But during the course of the year, as Connecticut's representative of teacher of the year, she learned, that there were some issues she cared about and got some ideas about how she might move those forward. And then she put a plan into place to implement that. And I think it's, a trajectory. Not everybody's going to get elected to Congress, obviously, but it's a trajectory a lot of young people can learn from to identify the things that you are passionate about and then find a way to work on them. And that thing will then lead to the next thing, which will lead to the next thing.
Yeah, I think one thing that her story really shows to everyone is that it's never too late to become interested in public policy, and it's never too late to develop a passion for these issues. Like you said, her background was as a teacher, and then, like you were saying, when she was speaking, she said that she had no idea what some of the people in the room were talking about, but she took the time and she learned because she was so passionate about making a change. And I think as seniors, a lot of us, maybe when we came into college, didn't have such a big interest in public policy. And then maybe we took a class, or maybe we were inspired by current events. And even for people after they graduate, you don't have to be a public policy major to get involved in public policy or to have a career in public policy. And I think that's something that her story really, really shined a light on.
Definitely, absolutely. And something I also found so inspiring about this process is that when the students came together, it wasn't really politics as usual. We prioritized coalitions and innovation. In the Asheville specific plan, we worked to bring every stakeholder in this issue together, from department heads to food services, to financial aid, to the senior staff, and in the cross-campus groups, interdisciplinary majors, economists, public policy leaders. Everyone's ideas were heard, and we were able to build a coalition approach to this issue that didn't prioritize one group's needs over another, but rather brought everyone in and created a solution that worked for all of us. So that I found that really, really inspiring, that we focus on the coalition more so than our own sort of political agendas with this project, especially with an issue as critical as food insecurity that affects all of us.
Yeah, let's take this up a level. I'd like to show a slide that gives you a sense of the extent of food insecurity in the United States, but also in North Carolina, and also what's happened during the course of the pandemic. So there's the Feeding America is this national lobbying organization that is the representative of all the big food banks, all the leading food groups in the country. And they collect data every year on what's going on. And if you look at the difference between the pre-pandemic levels of hunger and the post-pandemic levels of hunger, this is an estimate for 2021 that those who are food insecure will go up by about 20% this year nationally. And in North Carolina, that means there are 1.7 million people, including a large number of children, that are food insecure. They don't know exactly where their next meal is coming from or what that next meal will be. And it's not necessarily going to be nutritional. So this is an issue that is clear and real on college campuses. It's also clear and real to people across the state and across the country. And one of the challenges, I think, as we look at this issue is where to begin. So I wanted to turn, if we could, to Commissioner Ronnie Smith. Commissioner Smith is the immediate past president of the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. And he looked at that same information that we were just showing and said, we've got to do something about it. So using his platform as president of the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, he formed a group of other county commissioners that worked for a 9-month period on developing ideas about what counties can do. And Commissioner Smith, thank you for joining us. We had a little bit of trouble getting you on, but pleased that you're with us now.
Thank you very much. And you wouldn't realize what I had to do to get on this thing this morning. I'm away from home. I'm here at A&T University, and I try to use I use my wife's computer, and I'm not familiar with it, and plus I have a problem with it. But good morning to everybody, and I'm sorry that I missed some of the presentation because I was in and out. But I'm glad to be on board, and I just want to thank all the young people, college students, our future leaders, for taking on such a great issue. And food insecurity have been something among us for quite some time, but it took the pandemic actually to bring it to the forefront and begin to look at statistics and look at the insecurity right on our back doorsteps.
I think one of the interesting things about food is at a time when almost every issue is political, food insecurity does not seem to be quite as political. And your team of county commissioners that you pulled together represented both Republicans and Democrats.
Yes.
We had Sue Hinman from Granville County came to the summit last week and was just, a passionate advocate for taking steps on food insecurity. I wanted you to just talk for a minute about what your recommendations were from the report, and what are the big ideas you were lifting up in the report, and then we'll talk a little bit about how students might be able to help with that, or your advice on how they might be able to move ideas forward.
Well, actually, our report, what we wanted to do is we wanted to find out what counties, leaders in the counties could take their influence as well as our resources to strengthen the opportunity to fight food insecurity. And when we looked at it from a total wide lens approach. Instead of food insecurity, we want to look at the food system resiliency, the ability to sustain a food system regardless of what crisis may come our way. And we as county commissioners and county leaders, we have a lot of resources that prior to the pandemic that we were not using because we didn't have the conversation that is going on today and began to focus on those resources. The first thing that we have to look at is partnership and collaboration. That means that we have organizations out there, food pantries, we have food banks, we have food council. We have people that have been doing this for quite some time and are good at it, whether United Way or religious organization. And by assessing resources within our counties, find out who these agencies are and who we want to, and we needed to partner with these individuals. And what we bring to the table is the county has a lot of resources. We have facility, we have land, all these different things that we have. But if you don't understand what is needed, then these resources mean nothing. So we began to ensure that we can partner with these organizations, assessing what they're doing, and just basically discussing as to what they need and how we can provide assistance in solving this, coming up with a solution. Also, one of the recommendations is transit. The transit system, that's one of the biggest recurring issues that we face in our counties when it comes to food insecurity is that, we have to look at the entire system, where the USDA bring food into the states, how it goes to the different hubs, to the different food banks. And then most of all, what's important is getting that food to the last mile. That is to those individuals that may be homebound, may be shut in, may not have the transportation. And we have transit systems within the counties. And what we're looking at and what we've done is to how can we use those resources? How can we reroute our particular transit system, being able to provide a system? Also, we've looked at putting shelves and those type things on the vans and buses that transport people that can also carry food with them. So transportation is a big issue when it comes to food insecurity. We also looked at opportunity of looking at county assets. We have, as I said before, we have plenty of assets, facilities, storage places, and what have you. The biggest problem we ran into is with the number of food that was coming in during the pandemic was that being able to maintain and store these foods, as well as cold storage. That has been a big problem, not only with our food banks, but also with some of the farmers and producers. By partnering with the county, using county resources in many of our counties, we have been able to deal with those type issues. And that's pretty much on that recommendation. But also with the ARP, American Rescue Plan, monies that are beginning to, the recovery monies are beginning to come into the counties. Many of the counties are using those monies to pass out, to give out grants and those type things to organizations that are in the business of delivering food to those that need it the most.
Commissioner Smith, we have a question in on Facebook that asks about the funding that's coming down from the federal government for alternative forms of transportation, and wondering whether that is something that might be helpful in getting food out to people who need it. Is that something you've looked at or
Yes,
thought
sir.
about?
Yes, sir. Actually, my county, Martin County, McDowell County has a food box delivery program that they started back during the CARES Act. They were using funds from the CARES Act, where they partner with the Human Services Agency, Transit, and the county itself, and use the transit system to deliver food. And basically what they are planning on doing, well, I'll put it this way, Martin County adopted that program. And basically we went out to the federal government and we actually we applied for a grant to be able to support that. But a lot of the American Rescue Funds that's coming our way, we're going to use that to help with providing a solution to the issue of food insecurity. And many counties are, it's all depending on how they prioritize, their resources. Each county is an individual county. And, even though that we have food insecurity pretty much across North Carolina, there are some counties that are worse off than others.
All right, Commissioner Smith, Sarah Langer Hall, who's the person who's really been running the Institute for Emerging Issues Pilot 21 program, put a link to the report in the chat, and you can see it on your screen now. If you can't write all that down, just go to ncacc.org and look up the Resilience Initiative. So that way people can see the full report that you were just talking about. Let me bring in our guests again, Shevani and Ron, because I really want to talk, if we can, for the next few minutes about how you move an idea forward once you have it. So you're an experienced county commissioner, and you enlisted a number of your other county commissioners on this. And then you wrote a report to a bunch of other busy county commissioners that, it might not be their number one priority. And I'm wondering, what your strategy has been to get people to pay attention to this report so that, it becomes a slightly bigger priority for them. Do you have any advice about how to take a report and turn it into something that changes lives and gets people excited?
Yes, sir. One of the things when I decided to take on this initiative was that I asked for volunteers. And I believe that when people is involved at the grassroots level, beginning to put these resources together, they buy into it. And as Leslie was saying earlier, is that we went across. We don't believe in as far as politics and partisan and those type things when we're dealing with issues. The county commissioner, we look at the political platform a little different than some other organizations because we don't use. I was commissioner for quite a few years before I even knew what most of the people affiliation was. But to move it, you have to have individuals engaged that are motivated and want to do this. Okay, and the board that we put together across the county, across the state, with individuals that was passionate. And you made a statement a few minutes ago, Leslie, about Sue Hinman. If you heard her voice every time that she opened her mouth, these are the type of people. And just last month, I was at a board of directors meeting, and a gentleman from Lee County, okay, they wanted to start a food market, farmers market, in an area that was considered a food desert, okay? And when it first hit the board agenda, it did not pass. And he was telling me last month that after they looked at that report and talked it over in their board, every member of their board voted to pass it. The biggest thing is putting it out there is one thing, but the conversation and constantly talking with people and sharing things and ideas, and most of all, wins and accomplishments. That's the key. That's how you put it across the state and the nation.
That's fantastic. Working with both the UNC-Asheville group and the Cross Campus group, I was sort of bouncing in between the ideas of a lot of different students to figure out a plan that would work for our community specifically. So my question is, as a county commissioner, asking for volunteers of other county commissioners, how did those conversations go to come to a plan that would really work for not only your specific region, but also for the state as a broad approach?
Well, what we did, we went out to we did a lot of traveling, okay? We had a lot of, and basically he was telling us that a lot of things you did by virtue. One of the things that basically is an advantage or opportunity was that we was able to see 2 or 3 different places and never leaving our homes, okay, as far as operation. So we looked at what was out there that was working, what made sense. We looked at it and we shared it with other commissioners, and they go, man, I can do that. We can do that. We have that. We never thought of that. And that's how, you can move it across the state or move it across the nation. We have so many resources that we have no idea that we use it for 1 or 2 things, but there's other things, methods that we could provide to ensure that we can fight this pandemic of food insecurity.
That's fantastic. It's great to see the leadership working together like that. If I could follow up, at UNCA, we try to prioritize inclusion, equity, and access for all students. My specific policy proposal broadens the access not only to students who live on campus, which would be targeted by food pantries and food delivery programs, but also for students who live off campus too, because they also struggle with food insecurity.
Yes.
So my question is, how do you prioritize access both to people who need it the most, but also to the individuals across the state, really, who would be marginalized and sort of placed outside of the realm of help traditionally? How do you reach your communities to make sure that you're providing the needs that they need, not only the needs that the sort of leadership sees the need for?
With any organization, you have formal leaders and you have informal leaders. And I've learned a long time ago, the informal leaders are the ones that they basically have their boots on the ground. They know where things are. They know what's going on. That's why we have to rely on our churches. We have to rely on all different civic groups and those type things. Partner with them, and they can provide us information that we can't see from basically where we are, because there's so many other things that's going on. But believe me, if you bring those people and let them be part of the community of trying to find solutions, 9 times out of 10, they have the answers that can help you find that solution. But working together, conversation, you can never talk too much about this subject. And but the biggest thing is resources. We're in a position that we have resources, we have financial resources, we have so many other different resources, and you take those resources and partner with these people that do what they do very well, and those are great solutions. You'll find some great solution in that.
Great, thank you very much.
Commissioner Smith, I love what you said about secondary leadership playing a role in combating food security. And I noticed one of your recommendations was improving the transit system. One of our Pilot 21 cross-campus teams actually tackled this issue in their recommendation. They had the idea of using sort of a location analysis to place food pantries strategically on bus routes. So I believe it was Aden Klein of Duke University and Peyton Barish of NC State University. They did a case study of Durham and Wake counties and found that most food pantries were inaccessible by bus routes. And they used their recommendation to create the beginnings of some strategies to use data to help cities be more conscious of the placements of their food pantries. And one of the questions asked from their audience commended their research, but questioned how this recommendation would actually be put into practice. And you talked a little bit about partnerships with the communities and other organizations playing a role in advancing a recommendation. So I would just ask, what does someone do when there's a conflict with a partner in the community? For example, you talked about working with religious institutions and churches. And so what happens when you and a partner have a disagreement about moving forward a recommendation, and how do you kind of put your differences aside for the greater good?
Well, we all are human, and someone said something to me many years ago about many people want to be in leadership roles, and if they can't be there, create their own organization. Oh yes, we run into organizations where people have been providing support to a particular community, and that's fine if that's what they want to do, and if we can work with them in providing resources, as some of these organizations does not have the transit system to go to the food banks, regional banks, and pick up food and what have you. So we try to find whatever opportunity or situation that we can assist them. We don't try to force anything on anyone. You have to work with those that will work with you. And you build such a organization. I think that one of the biggest thing is that a lot of our individuals that are homebound or in small communities, they think that that particular food pantry is the only pantry that can serve them. What we try to do in some of our counties, many of our counties, is that we do a daily bulletin as to the times and dates that food banks will be open, food pantries will be open, and we try to make it available to them through social media and what have you, so they can find out what they are. But if a person does not want to work with your organization, then that's fine. You keep going forward. You work with those that will work with you, and sooner or later, you may find that they'll come to you and they want to be part of, because the issue itself is bigger than any organization or any of us.
Commissioner Smith, let's take just one step back and maybe just have you tell us a little bit about what you tell young people when they say they want to get involved in public policy. What's your advice for them? And why should somebody spend part of their life doing what you've spent part of your life doing?
Well, half my life I spent as a military officer, and I retired, and I came back to my hometown that I grew up in, a little small rural area, very small populated area, and I felt that God had blessed me with some things that I could bring back and share and partner with individuals that was in my county and my communities, and that's. But I'll say to anyone, if you have the passion to serve people and want to serve people, and each of these, and I can just hear it in the voices of these young people here that they care about their community, they care about people, and God bless you with soft skills that you can be able to relate to people and listen to people. Leadership is listening. And I would say if that's what you want to do, then we would love to have you into any form of public service.
I would just say there are a lot of different ways of doing it too. You can run for office as you have.
Mm-hmm.
You can work in a position where you're paid to work on public policy sorts of issues. You can also be a volunteer on a board. You can
right.
help a nonprofit or volunteer on a city or county commission board. Some people choose to lobby with part of their time, and that it's not something you need to do necessarily the same way for all of your life. You may be paid to do it for a little while as a full-time employee. You may be an elected official for a while. You may take some time off and volunteer on a board. But, there are a lot of different ways of approaching this over the course of a lifetime. So let me go back to Ron Dumas and Shevani Mehta. And both of you are going to have plenty of options when you get out of school. There's going to be a lot of temptation to leave all this behind and go for the big money going somewhere else. What is it about this process that you've liked? And, are you ready to sign a binding commitment to be involved some way or another in public policy for the rest of your life? No pressure here.
Want to go first, Shevani?
Yeah, I think one thing that this project and working at IEI in particular has shown me is that no matter what career I want to have, it should be rooted in civic engagement. And, I've done internships in the corporate sector and something's just missing there for me, And, it's like when I leave work every day at IEI, it's like, wow, like what I did today is really going to make a difference in someone else's life. And that's what I'd look for in my future career. And like you said, that comes in many different ways, whether it's serving in your local government or working for an organization like IEI, tackling the important issues like food security. Either way, you're going to be making a difference. And I think that's something that all the participants of Pilot 21 realized at the summit is like, hey, this work is really meaningful and it's something that I'd like to continue to do. Even if it's a small part or my career in my life, it's something that I really want to be involved in.
All right, Ron, what's next for you?
Well, I want to echo something that Commissioner Smith said about public policy. The real love for me, and I think for a lot of other students that I've been able to work with in public policy, is working with the public, being a servant of the public. When I ran for student body president last year, the best part about running was talking to the endless lines of students who had issues that felt that they weren't heard. And being a senator this year, working with students who felt like their issues weren't really issues that were worth talking about, but bringing them into the Senate, having them talk to the Senate and passing legislation that supported them. That's the real love of the public policy work that we do. And that's critical to what I hope to do. I came from a small town in Georgia, a one gas station town with a single gas station in the very center, one small grocery store, and the high school down the road. And I know a lot of people that I would have graduated with if I had stayed there. They never really left the town. And I know that there is not a lot of opportunity for people there if they're struggling with food insecurity or housing insecurity or stagnation of wages or loss of economy. All of those things are sort of lost on them because they don't live in a place where people are willing to invest in those places because they're not high potential places. So the work that I want to do is be a person who can address issues for communities like that are left behind, that are stagnant, and bring prosperity to those places, because I think those people deserve to live as prosperously as people in the higher places like New York or locally like in Charlotte and things like that. So that's really critical to the work that I want to do. I want to be a person that can help resolve the issues that are critical to the lives of people.
All right, Commissioner Smith, that makes me feel pretty good. What do you think about all that?
I tell you what, it's wonderful. You know, people say our generation to come is we just can't wait to see. Whatever these two individuals do in life, they're going to be very, very successful, because it starts with having that type of positive attitude. Thank y'all so much for all the work that you're doing and all the work you're going to do in the future. You're going to do great for this country.
Thank you, Commissioner Ronnie Smith with Martin County, former past president of the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, Ron Dumas, senior at UNC-Asheville, Shevani Mehta, a senior at NC State. Thanks to all of you for being part of this project and for your advice and counsel, and hope some great things come out of this. We're going to continue the work on this. So thanks to all for being part of this. Pilot 21 is a project that was supported by the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. It was led at NC State by Sarah Langer Hall, with tremendous assistance from Kirsten Chang, and as you've heard today, from Shevani Mehta. The Pilot 21 Summit last week was supported by James Herrick, who's also the producer of this podcast, and Greg Hedgepeth, with a lot of help from Simone Rosario. So we had great help in moving the project forward. And now the question is, can we move these ideas forward? And that's going to be mostly up to the students. We're going to be supporting them and wishing them the best of luck. If you have ideas about how to help them, please reach out to us and let us know. First and Future Live, this show that you've just been watching, is based on an idea from the IEI Communications Director, Greg Hedgepeth, with promotion by Kirsten Chang and regular research from Shevani Mehta. James Herrick, as always, is the executive producer of the podcast. If you liked it, we hope you'll let your friends know, and look for the recording on the IEI YouTube channel, or you can also find it on our website, emergingissues.org. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another show coming up November 23rd at 9 a.m. We'll be announcing the topic shortly. That's it for today. For all of us at North Carolina State's Institute for Emerging Issues, thank you for listening. We'll see you in the future.